An ordinary shift for a police officer.
This case came in as just another burglary.
This is an offence we have seen quite a lot of.
Can quickly take an extraordinary turn.
It's gone from 0 to 100 in no time at all.
A routine case
Just thought we were picking up someone who's maybe just a bit drunk and disorderly.
can suddenly spiral into a serious incident.
I need to arrest you on suspicion of murder.
The more I dig, the more I find. How big was this case going to get?
He has started a fire, he's done it deliberately and used some kind of fuel to get that fire going.
Sometimes the most minor crimes
It's really important that we get hold of him as quickly as possible and get him off the street.
can crack major cases.
We did have an international manhunt on our hands. Gotcha.
Today on Big Little Crimes, a complaint about the purchase of a car,
He had taken his car for a service and the garage told him that his car had been clocked by thousands of miles.
leads to a dodgy car dealer who takes his right to remain silent very literally.
His solicitor said to me, "Officer, I've got to tell you that he is suffering from PTSD and he is unable to answer any of your questions."
But first, a chance arrest after a small-time drug deal.
A vehicle pulls up and the man has supplied drugs from within that vehicle.
Leads Northumbria Police to a much bigger discovery.
Little did he know he was about to be interviewed in relation to a potentially £1 million drugs factory. I'm Johnny Story, I'm a police constable in the Serious and Organised Crime team. My dad was in the police, all his brothers were in the police, his dad was in the police. And it was just something that ran through my family and I've always found it interesting.
It's a bustling August evening in Newcastle, and PC Johnny Story and his colleagues are on shift.
I was with a number of other officers in plain clothes out in Newcastle city centre. Nothing kind of stood out, you know, a couple of people stopped searched, a couple of vehicles stopped searched, but no kind of big fines or anything like that.
Part way through the evening, the team take a break, but quickly get a reminder that police officers are never really off duty.
I get a phone call from Mickey. He's sitting in his vehicle having his food and he glances right out of his window and approximately 10 yards away there is a man comes out of the pizza shop. The vehicle pulls up. The man has supplied drugs from within that vehicle. My initial response was just, "You've seen what?" The man then goes back into the pizza shop and sits down and enjoys his meal. So I drive up, obviously we're doing checks on the vehicle which has been involved in the drug supply. Other officers who are on the team, they head towards the vehicle's last registered address.
As the pizzeria has no involvement in what's going on, Johnny needs to inform the staff of their intentions.
Updated the manager and headed over to the table in the far corner of the restaurant. By that point, I think the two men had looked up and kind of knew what was going on. The man who was outside, who was supplied the drugs, he's immediately said, "Yeah, I've got drugs in my coat pocket," and he handed those drugs over, and he was obviously promptly arrested in relation to that. The other man, I was searching. There was just something not right about him. He was very quiet, whereas the other man was sort of coming forward with information and being very sort of brash about the way he was behaving, the way he was acting, whereas this other man was very quiet, sort of appeared very nervous. More interestingly, he had two mobile phones. One was on the table where he was sat, but one was inside his jacket as well. He had one personal phone, which was clearly his personal mobile phone, but the second one was a bit more basic and looked more to me like a work phone. And that's where my suspicions about him started to raise a little. Both men were arrested on suspicion of possession of Class A drugs.
But Johnny can't get the quieter man's odd behaviour out of his head, so he decides to keep digging.
He had some car keys in his pocket. I took those car keys out, it was for a Volvo. Walked onto Westgate Hill, looked up and down, I could see a Volvo parked 3 or 4 spaces up the road. pressed the remote central lock and the car unlocked. And at that point, I searched that vehicle. There was a number of receipts and a lot of sort of work tools. And the receipt that I could see was for a hydroponics company, a legitimate company. They supply things for growing plants, sort of greenhouse type equipment, but they're also obviously very commonly used by criminal organisations on large-scale cannabis farms. And the receipt that I could see was for quite a bit of money and quite a bit of equipment. At that point, I'm thinking that the man that I've got detained, he's involved in a lot more than just buying a little bit of drugs outside of the pizza shop.
With Johnny's suspicions raised and the possibility of much greater criminality, he turns his attention to the main suspect's phones.
If there is going to be anything else in these investigations, mobile phones are key. I wasn't able to access his personal phone, but when I was interrogating his works phone, I was able to get into that mobile phone at that point. And that's where everything started. I was sitting having a coffee, putting items through the property system as we would normally do, and I just literally shouted, "Stop. Just stop what you're doing, come and look at this." And on the mobile phone, it was very basic, which again is more suspicious in itself. He only had a couple of apps, and I could see that one of them was open, and it was a live recording CCTV system app. And then what I saw was not what I was expecting. It was a lifetime CCTV recording, multiple cameras, externally, internally, of a very significant large-scale cannabis farm. There was live recordings on that mobile phone of cannabis workers within that factory. Just even on the view of the CCTV, it was a significant size.
Things just got serious. What started as an arrest for a small-time drug deal has now potentially uncovered a drugs factory producing thousands of pounds worth of cannabis.
I was just a bit bewildered, to be perfectly honest. But, you know, your priority immediately switches back to where is that and how do I get it?
They say silence is golden. But in our next case, a criminal takes the right to remain silent to a whole new level. A normally chatty car dealer tries to outwit a detective by claiming he's lost the power of speech.
My name's Roy Wilkinson. I joined the Metropolitan Police in 1973, and for 28 of the 30 years I spent in the CID. Day-to-day cases would have been burglaries, robberies, frauds, assaults, of course. Those were the major things that we dealt with. I'm nosy, and I really enjoyed investigation, getting to the nitty-gritty of why someone done something and how they did it, and if it was against the law, to get them punished.
But one investigation in particular stands out for Roy, while stationed at Ruislip in West London. It starts with what looks like a simple case of car tampering.
A magistrate came to the police station and told us that he had bought a car, I think it was a BMW, from someone in Ruislip, who he believed to be a car dealer, and that the car had been clocked. Clocking is reversing the mileometer on the car to make it look as though it had done less miles than what it actually had. He knew this because he had taken his car for a service, and the garage told him that his car had been clocked by thousands of miles. The benefit of clocking a vehicle is that the car dealer can then sell it for more money.
A case like this would normally be handled by the local council's Trading Standards Office, but Roy suspects this isn't a one-off.
Because he had bought it from a car dealer, I thought there was a blooming good chance that he'd done this to more vehicles, and if he'd done it with more vehicles, he would have made thousands. A statement was taken from the magistrate, and I then did the background checks on the vehicle, and found that yes, it definitely had been clocked.
Now there's evidence a crime has been committed. It's time for Roy to have a chat with the car dealer.
So I went to see him, and he said he was a car dealer and that he worked from home and that he got cars in the surrounding streets. My first impressions of him was that he was a right geezer, a Londoner who was a likeable fella. He was trying to make a few bob, and although he was making it illegally, he was what I would call a typical second-hand car salesman. Plenty of Tom on his fingers. That's what we call Tom. Tomfoolery, jewellery. Spoke with a Cockney accent, and he was a villain. And I wanted to get to the bottom of what he was doing.
Roy needs to prove that the tampering to the magistrate's car isn't an isolated case. So he starts trying to find other vehicles the dealers got parked in nearby streets.
Myself and my working partner and the uniform looked for high-value cars that weren't registered to the Ruislip area, and we found about 14. We confiscated them.
It's now clear this car dealer's deception isn't limited to a few rogue incidents. He's a big-time criminal who's gone nationwide with his trickery.
I managed to track down other folk that had bought cars from him. They lived all over the country, and the owners were saying exactly the same thing as the magistrate had said. And they realised that they'd been had.
It's hard evidence that the car dealer is a serial offender.
You've clocked so many cars, you've cost so many people so many thousands of pounds that you deserve to get punished. And I was going to do my utmost to punish him. I went to see him and I told him that we believed he'd been obtaining money by deception and arrested him. All right, Mr. Wilkinson, no problem. Let me get my shoes on, I'll come with you. It was as good as gold. And on the way back to the police station, he told me that he had been assaulted by a group of lads the previous week, and that he was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder because of this serious assault. And I said to him, well, I don't remember seeing it in the crime book. Oh, I didn't report it to the police. He says, you've got better things to do. You know, he was a diamond. Oh, I didn't believe it. He got to Uxbridge Police Station, he booked in, gave his name and address, and asked to see a solicitor. On advice of his solicitor, he didn't answer any questions, which was fine. That was his right. So I then had to bail him.
Over the following weeks, Roy gathers more evidence.
The 14 cars that we found around his property had all been clocked.
Roy instructs the car dealer to return for more questioning. But he's in for a bit of a surprise. The dealer has taken his right to remain silent very literally.
He then came back to the police station with his solicitor, and I began to ask him questions. And his solicitor said to me, Officer, I've got to tell you that he, the car dealer, is mute. He is suffering from PTSD and he is unable to answer any of your questions. I said, is that on your advice? So he said, no, he can't speak. He's suffering from PTSD after the assault. I thought, oh, this is cracking. You know, I thought he's playing the system. And I didn't mind that. I didn't mind. He's playing the system.
Roy is convinced the car dealer is faking this sudden inability to speak. Then he gets the chance to prove it.
I had a whisper from someone that he was going around talking to people, no problem. And then he put himself into the hospital as suffering from PTSD. So I said to my colleague, John, I've got a job for you. I said, I want you to go down to Hillingdon Hospital, acquire a doctor's coat and some stethoscopes, and I want you to go and see the car dealer. So one Saturday morning, John goes down to the hospital, and without saying a word, He saw the car dealer talking to other patients and nurses, and the car dealer looked across, saw John, and said, "Hello, Doc, you come to see me about my marital problems?" So John said, "No, actually, DC Wilkinson has sent me from Ruislip Police Station." The car dealer then let out an expletive, and John left. My response was, yes, I knew he was lying, which is part of a detective's work.
But despite being caught out at the hospital, on his next visit to the police station, the dealer's lips remain firmly sealed.
When the car dealer came back to Ruislip on bail, he was charged with, I think it was about 14 offences of obtaining money by deception. Never said a word. His solicitor spoke for him. We had to go to Uxbridge Magistrates Court, where again he refused to answer any questions, even his name, address, and he kept up the charade for months, almost a year.
However, this sound of silence gives Roy another headache. Before the car dealer can be tried for obtaining money by deception, the court needs to decide if his inability to speak is genuine, caused, as he claims, by PTSD, or if he's putting it on maliciously in a bid to evade justice.
We eventually go to Crown Court, and on the day of the court, we had 2 trials. We had a jury enrolled to see whether the car dealer was mute of malice, meaning he's doing it on purpose, or mute by visitation of God, meaning, yeah, he's not well. So the jury was sworn in, the evidence was given. I didn't have to call any witnesses because the defence couldn't contradict what I said because they say they didn't have any instructions from him. The jury were discharged and they came back and found that he was guilty of being mute of malice, i.e. he was putting it on and he could really speak if he chose to. The judge then explained to the car dealer, who's still sitting in the dock, "You're now going to be indicted for obtaining money by deception."
A new jury is sworn in. Roy gives his evidence to prove that the car dealer isn't just a small-time crook. His villainy spreads far and wide. But when it's the defence's turn, there's just a wall of silence.
Nothing came back at all. The jury were discharged and they came back saying that he was guilty of obtaining money by deception. So he was indicted for those 14 cars and given one last chance to speak, and he wouldn't. His defence counsel got up, spoke to the judge and said, I can't give you any instructions, I can't, because I haven't been able to take any instructions. So he was sentenced, he got 3 years, and he was taken downstairs. When he was found guilty, I just thought, yeah, good. Even though I liked the guy, I was pleased.
Then to Roy's surprise, the car dealer's game runs into one final round.
I was just about to leave the front door at Isleworth Crown Court and there was a tannoy. "Would DC Wilkinson please come to the cells?" I went down to the cells and the jailer down there said, "The car dealer wants to have a word with you." And I said, "What?" I said, "That's the first time in a year that he wants to speak to me." Car dealer got up off the bench, came, put his hand out to shake my hand, and he said, "No hard feelings, Wilkie." And he laughed, I laughed, shook his hand, left. I look back on it with pride because it was difficult, but at the end of the day, I won.
Back in Northumbria, officers stopping for a bite to eat chance upon a small drug deal outside a pizzeria, leading them to uncover a much bigger crime.
It was a lifetime CCTV recording, multiple cameras, externally, internally, of a very significant large-scale cannabis farm. My response is, where is that?
But the live feed could be coming from anywhere in the world. It'll be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Then Johnny notices a tiny detail that makes all the difference.
One of the bottom cameras was an external camera. It was very distinctive with an upside-down boat in the yard. As bizarre as that is, I knew exactly where that was. I knew the area, I'd worked the area before, and I shouted to Fran, I know where that is.
It's an astonishing piece of luck. Next, Johnny and his team draw up a plan to raid the cannabis farm. They arrive at dead of night and must act fast to avoid alerting anyone inside.
It's exciting, and knowing that probably within 5 minutes you could potentially recover, you know, a very, very significant amount of drugs. We've all arrived here, and this is what we've been met with here, the big steel gate. We don't know what's on the other side. Even though we've viewed the CCTV that's available, you still don't know what's behind that gate once you get through it.
Breaking the lock on the gate, they move quickly and gain entry to the building.
As soon as we went there, you could hear the whirring of the extractor fans. At that point, you know, you're starting to realise you're in the right place. You know what's coming, you know what's behind that door. So as soon as we went through that door, you're hit with a light. You can smell it, you can hear the noise. I couldn't see anything else other than cannabis. There was just cannabis from the doorway all the way to the back. It was everywhere. Everything was neat, pristine. All the lamps were all in uniform fashion. There was internal CCTV, all the wiring and electrics was very high level. You could see that it was a very sophisticated setup, ran by people who clearly knew what they were doing.
What started as a routine drug search has quickly grown into something much more serious. Next, the team search the building to see if anyone is there.
So we did a full sweep of the farm. There was nobody in there. We came back out, and it was at that point I noticed a power cable running from the farm into the caravan. Windows, which obviously made me a little bit suspicious of who was in there. Opening the door, having a little bit of a look. It's one of those very sort of spooky, without sounding cheesy, one of them spooky moments where you know somebody's in there but you don't know where they are. And the only place I couldn't see was a shower curtain which was pulled across. But I could see his feet underneath it. Pulled it back and one of the men was inside of the shower curtain hiding. He was absolutely terrified. I've genuinely never seen anybody as scared as him at that point. You know, he spoke barely any English at all, so it was very hard to communicate with him in that. The main priority is just get him in a police car and get him to Forth Banks Police Station in the custody suite.
Back at the station, the officers take a second look at the mobile phone they'd seized at the pizzeria. It belongs to the man who is now their main suspect, Edison Sulanjanku.
The priority for me is looking at Edison Sulanjanku's phone, the man who was arrested at the pizza shop with the car keys and the 2 mobile phones. He had access to the monitor and the CCTV. He clearly is in some sort of role where he's overseeing what's going on inside that farm. So for me, the priority was what is on that mobile phone and where can it take in this investigation. And that's where I uncovered a conversation with somebody organising a delivery up to Sunderland.
Police think the message proves Sulanjanku is getting the cannabis delivered to his own home. They need to get a search warrant quickly before word gets out that they've busted the cannabis growing operation. And luckily, it appears Sulanjanku's house key is on the same keyring as his car.
So I got there, all the blinds were shut. I knocked on the door. I could hear movement from inside. Whoever it was wasn't coming to the door. I knocked again. Identify ourselves as the police. Still no answer, so I put the key in the lock, turned it, which opened it, to which he then came to the door. And I immediately recognised him as one of the men from the footage from the cannabis farm. He tried to slam the door shut, but I had my foot in the door. I forced the door open. He ran into the living room, clearly was just in full panic mode at that point. He couldn't speak very good English. All I was able to kind of gauge from was that he shouldn't be in the country, he was here illegally. And the way he was going on presented to me that there was something significant inside this address, that he was clearly in charge of looking after while people were out. And at that point, one of the other officers shouted up from the other end of the room and asked me to come round and have a look at what was in the cupboard under the stairs. I came round, looked through the door, and there was 17 kilos of vacuum-packed cannabis. Just literally, the cupboard was just full of cannabis, vacuum-packed. The man that was inside the address, he was arrested, and then he was detained and placed into handcuffs.
This has gone from an arrest for drug possession to dismantling a full-blown cannabis factory in less than 24 hours. Back at the station, Edison Sulanjanku is still in custody and in for a big surprise.
So that was the first point. Edison had been interviewed. As far as he was concerned, he was still sitting in custody in his cell in relation to a small amount of cocaine which had been bought the previous night on Westgate Hill. Little did he know he was about to be interviewed in relation to a potentially £1 million drugs factory, and also the significant recovery of 17 kilos of cannabis from where he was living. So that came as a bit of a shock to him. Very deflated, very nervous, completely changed.
With all the evidence gathered, the team can now build their case. Sulanjanku and the other arrested men face a range of charges, including possession of cannabis with intent to supply and cannabis production. Sulanjanku pleads guilty and is sentenced to 4.5 years. The 2 other men arrested by Johnny, in the Caravan and in Sunderland, are also jailed for 16 and 18 months.
Through the whole investigation, Edison pleading guilty was my favourite part because I had to work really hard for that. And so when I eventually got the phone call to say that he was pleading guilty, it was really, really satisfying. Yes, there's a lot of money, but at the cost of that is a lot of violence, a lot of forced labour, a lot of slavery, a lot of human trafficking. But just in terms of the general community, you know, nobody wants to live next door to a cannabis farm. It's not just a win for us, it's a win for the communities that care about where they live and care about the, you know, the good lives that they live. And that's why you do it.
Next time on Big Little Crimes, a man trying to cash fake checks.
These are very, very high quality counterfeits.
Leads detectives to a major crime syndicate.
The gang attempted to defraud the banking industry of over £750,000.
And the hunt for an unlicensed driver sparks a major investigation into a hit and run that left a pensioner for dead.
Where has the vehicle gone and how can I get my hands on it?